So this is a big, big day, a beautiful day, potentially one of the great days ever in civilization.
I support your plan to end the war in Gaza, which achieves our war aims.
Together at the White House, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu delivered a 20-point plan promising a way to bring peace to Gaza.
Thank you very much, everybody. I want to thank the leaders of many Arab and Muslim nations for their tremendous support in developing the proposal, along with many of our allies in Europe.
I think this can be not only a new beginning for Gaza, I think it can be a new beginning for the entire region.
The plan demands that Hamas release Israeli hostages in exchange for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners and detainees.
If accepted by Hamas, this proposal calls for the release of all remaining hostages immediately, but in no case more than 72 hours. And it means the immediate end to the war itself, not just Gaza. It's the war itself.
Prime Minister Netanyahu vowed to go it alone if Hamas doesn't agree.
But if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself. This can be done the easy way, or it can be done the hard way, but it will be done.
Well, when Netanyahu says finish the job, he means defeat Hamas. But does he mean also the sort of physical demolition of Gaza, which is what he's been threatening?
Under the Trump proposal, there'd be a staged withdrawal by Israel from Gaza. Hamas members who disarm would be offered an amnesty and would have to agree to give up any role in governing the territory.
Now, it wouldn't be the total victory that Prime Minister Netanyahu had promoted, that he was pursuing, and there would be things Israel would have to give up: no annexation, no occupation, even maintaining the possibility of a Palestinian state. But it would be a defeat for Hamas, and that's appropriate.
Britain and France have backed the plan, with crucial support coming from Arab nations.
You have 8 Arab and Islamic foreign ministers backing this. And these aren't just Israel's sort of peace partners or traditional allies like the UAE and Jordan and Egypt, but it's some unusual countries like Qatar and Pakistan and Turkey.
From his stopover in the UAE, our Prime Minister urged Hamas to accept the plan.
Australia affirms the plan's commitment to denying Hamas any role in the future governance of Gaza, calls on Hamas to agree to the plan, lay down its arms and release all remaining hostages.
Earlier this year, President Trump caused outrage with his talk of turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, accompanied by an AI-generated impression.
Trump Gaza, #1.
The current plan places Donald Trump at the head of a so-called Board of Peace, which would oversee a temporary Palestinian governing body. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who's reported to be a key player in developing the plan, would also sit on the board. Palestinian politician Mustafa Barghouti has questioned Tony Blair's credibility.
We've struggled for 100 years to be independent and to get our sovereignty and our right to rule ourselves. Now they want to bring somebody who reminds us with British colonialism long time ago. That is totally unacceptable, especially that the reputation of Mr. Blair is absolutely horrifying. I mean, given his history in Iraq and his participation in the destruction of Iraq.
A proposed Trump development plan would rebuild Gaza.
He's saying this is my Trump plan, and this is part of Trump Incorporated. He's got commercial interests there. The Gulf countries are interested in investing. And as we know, Trump is all about Nobels and oil wells. And he's looking at both with this plan.
But what of the Palestinian people? Under the plan, Palestinians could remain in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority could take control of Gaza after meeting certain conditions on reform.
The Palestinian Authority is a tricky one because it's left vague in the plan. Netanyahu's sort of mantra has been no Hamas, no Abbas, meaning Mahmoud Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority. So the plan says that if there's Palestinian Authority reform, then they will be able to take part in the plan. Reform is kind of nebulous, and if it's performance-based rather than time-based, then that can be delayed and delayed and delayed indefinitely. On the other hand, the Palestinians and the Arab states are saying, we'll agree to this only if we have Palestinian Authority on the ground taking control.
While the authority has welcomed the plan, it wasn't involved in negotiations.
When you negotiate, you take and give, and you include all parties in the negotiations to reach an agreement. In this case, it was unfortunately the Palestinian side, not just Hamas, by the way, all Palestinians were excluded from the discussion, absolutely all. And that is unacceptable.
Now the world waits for Hamas to respond.
We don't know yet whether Hamas will accept this deal. I think there is a reasonable chance to expect Hamas will say something like yes, but, and try to get some changes to the plan. But there's a lot of pressure. Even the Palestinian Authority is now behind this plan. So Hamas would really be out on an island by itself if it says no.
Middle East analyst Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib was born and raised in Gaza. He's now a resident senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Middle East programs. He says more than 30 members of his family have been killed during the war. Alkhatib is a long-time opponent of Hamas. Ahmed Fouad Alkhatib, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you for having me.
Does Hamas have any real options at this point other than to accept this deal?
Well, I think they must be feeling cornered. They're definitely out of options. They have fewer fighters. I don't buy the reports that suggest they've been able to recruit thousands more. I think they're exhausted. Their finances are limited. Hamas is essentially out of options, but it can also be dangerous for somebody who's out of options to be cornered because they might feel that they have nothing else to lose. Though I am hoping that there's enough there for Hamas in the proposed deal, particularly the 250 names, the security prisoners. I mean, Israel has 290 prisoners who have lifelong sentences. And so effectively, this amounts to emptying the prisons of Hamas's security prisoners, in addition to the 1,000 that will be released who've been held from Gaza. So there's enough there for them to both build a legacy and potentially attempt to regroup externally.
That, of course, is what all the principal players in this deal will be hoping to avoid. But in the short term, is it realistic that Hamas fighters will give up their weapons?
I don't foresee a scenario anytime soon in which Hamas really lays down the entirety of its arms. There could be a scenario in which they release some of their armaments for the cameras. Maybe they do some kind of a ceremony that they deliver them to the Indonesians, to the Emiratis. Maybe some of and the rest will be hidden in tunnels. Remember, we're talking about hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, many of which are unknown to the IDF or anybody else. Even Hamas's own members don't know the extent of the tunnel network. Very few people did, and half of them have been assassinated thus far. So it could be years, if not a decade, before the true extent of the tunnels is fully understood. And so Hamas may have the ability to just bury some of those weapons and guns and retrieve them only in a situation that serves its interests. And so there's that aspect. And then there's the other component, which is that where would they realistically seek refuge in? I mean, Israel's going to pursue them. It is a given fact that for the rest of their lives, they're going to be looking over their shoulders unless they're in Qatar. And I don't think Qatar and Doha is necessarily interested in becoming a depository for all, rejected terrorists from Gaza, if you will.
Just staying with Hamas and their next steps. They're a terrorist organization with a terrorist, violent mindset. What could motivate them to accept this deal?
Well, I think they're struggling, they're desperate, they're out of cash, they're out of options, they're feeling immense pressure. They have all of these anti-Hamas militias organized by the Abu Shabaab central node in southern Gaza, supported by the IDF, popping up everywhere. They've lost control of the territory. They're losing the ability of the control of the narrative. They're unable to really carry out significant attacks against the Israeli military to cause enough casualties. They relied on protests in America against the war, and that failed. They relied on protests in Israel against the Israeli government pushing for a deal, and that has thus far failed. They relied on the Qataris and the Egyptians to be able to mediate and apply pressure, and that has also failed. They even relied on the famine narrative and the idea that there was horrendous hunger and lack of nutrition and a horrible humanitarian catastrophe. They hoped that that would actually force the international community to stop the war, and that failed. So they don't really have a strategy. The suffering and the political pressure aren't working. So they want an off ramp as well.
The people of Gaza, the civilian population, are obviously profoundly traumatized right now. What is it that they want now?
Well, in addition to wanting the war to stop, in addition to wanting the basics, I mean, excuse the expression, but they want a place to go use the bathroom. They want to be able to take a shower once every week instead of once a month. They want laundry. So in addition to those just basic needs that you and I and our Western privilege don't think about, they also don't want their suffering, and this is what I'm also worried about, to become a checkbook for some leadership to parachute in and say, we're going to rebuild Gaza and let's rebuild Gaza. And then you have a rise of a millionaire class that just rises on the backs of those suffering people, those people without limbs, those people without their eyesight. They don't want another political entity to come in, whether it's Hamas 2.0 or Fatah, to ever again proclaim that we got this, people, we have the liberation and the freedom agenda. In a sense, they want a socially re-engineered political landscape such that their fate, their lives, their futures, their well-being is never again tied into the hands of psychopaths like Sinwar and Deif, or in the hands of other Palestinian leadership. They want to live on their land. They want to build Gaza, but they don't want to be any party to the resistance and armed resistance narrative. They want the coexistence narrative. They want the nation building narrative. And that's what I appreciate about the Trump plan, is that it wants Gaza developed for its people, and it abandons talks of the forced eviction, basically, of Palestinians.
Ahmed Alkhatib, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.